Do I need to stay around to bounce
The
something off of
Celtics made a comeback,
them?
much like Big Boobs did.
Okay.
And Small Boobs, a.k.a. the Cleveland Cavaliers, are trying to shut that down.
A little bit of a stretch, but we'll go with it.
We somehow had a big-time marquee game on November 19th in the NBA. And no, it was not because it was an NBA Cup game. It was because the Cleveland Cavaliers have, I think, the second longest winning streak to start a season. I think only Golden State had more, 24-0. But your Rockets at one point had 15-0, and the Cavs had 15-0 going into last night. But if you go on to the Google site today and you type in, are there any undefeated teams in the NBA? It will say, hell no, there's not. You can't just walk into the house of the champs and expect to come out undefeated. I'm sorry. It doesn't work like that. It almost did work like that because the Celtics had a 21-point lead in the second half, and it got down to 2. And there was a nice little 22-7 run by Cleveland. But this was a high-quality NBA basketball game. The Celtics were red hot from 3. At one point, they were 18 for 26. And then the old heads, they were really laughing it up because then the Celtics started missing. They started missing threes, and the Cavs started making a comeback. I said it to you yesterday, Zach. I think this Cavs team's legit. I don't know that they're going to be like the challenge to the Celtics, but they could be. They have a good, well-rounded team. They had a well-rounded team last year, and it got even better, and I guess they have a better coach. Kenny Atkinson. Kenny Atkinson is their coach, not JB Bickerstaff anymore. And what I did not notice, and I'll have to hand up to this because I've only watched like 3 Cavs games this year, parts of Cavs games. I'm not utilizing League Pass the way Simmons does. But their offense is better than I thought. In fact, it's historically good right now because I was impressed with their defense last year and the individual defenders they have on their team. But they have a pretty damn good offense too. In fact, going into last night, both the 24 Celtics and this Cavs team were like top 5 in all-time offensive rating. So take that how you will. The moment in the game last night was the Cavs making that comeback in the third quarter. They outscored them by like 20 or 25 points in that quarter. It couldn't have been that much. But the last possession of the third, Jayson Tatum comes down and just does a Jayson Tatum thing.
We'll take the last shot here. Down to 3, to 2. Tatum drops Niang. Tatum delivers one.
Yeah, going left. Just creates space. Cleveland wanted to push off. I didn't see it.
Drops him and says, fuck out of here, man. Get out of here. And who was that he dropped? None other than the winningest NBA player of the decade, Georges Niang. Why does he have so much disrespect for Georges Niang? How quick some of you forget.
It was right there. Hard to tell if he was actually grabbed, but he just stopped and stared at the bench. And they call for a technical foul. Now, it looked like on that play initially that Brown shoved Harden to the ground. That's Georges Niang, that right arm.
Grabs the leg of Brown trying to stop him from running back.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep, Tatum remembers. Tatum remembered that. Is it the dirtiest thing I've ever seen? No. But it's pretty Bush League to be on the bench and grab someone's knee who's trying to play and get back on defense. That's pretty Bush League. That's Georges Niang. That's what they teach him in Philly. That's how the Sixers teach him to play. They say, if you're going to play, you're going to do this from the bench. And if you're not, you'll also fit right in here. That's why we get Joel Embiid and Paul George. We have a good segment coming on next, by the way, but I am really bummed because I need to get a full segment with Pete talking about the Sixers and Joel Embiid and how embarrassing this is because it's so funny. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Celtics win over Cleveland. And does that mean they are still the team to beat in the East with the second best record in the conference? I think it is. I think it is. They're the defending champs, and they bring everyone back. And after the game, I'm starting to lose it with Shaq a little bit. Okay, Shaq is like an okay analyst, and obviously he's funny. Everyone loves Shaq. He's really funny. Does the general commercials, whatever.
I like Shaq.
A great Celtic, by the way, all-time great Celtic, who probably prevented them from winning a title too, but that's not necessarily his fault. But Shaq is becoming a bit of a Celtics hater. This is the same guy who had the Mavs winning in like 5 games last year and said they do not have guys that can guard Luka, and they fucking did from the beginning, and then they did guard Luka, and then after that he was like, I never said that.
Well,
and it's like, no, you did. We have the receipts of that. We talked about it on this show.
Yeah, I'd argue a little bit that whole inside the NBA staff was kind of a little.
Most of the talking heads,
Yeah,
because they wanted it to be true. They wanted, like, and that's okay to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
They wanted the Pavs to win it. They didn't want the favorite to
Fair
win,
enough.
but they all kind of tucked themselves into it, which is kind of silly. And then last night, Shaq was saying, well, the Cavs were basically down a guy because their best player played so horribly. I'm like, okay, basically down a guy versus the Celtics literally being down a guy until Christmas, down one of their starters. Kristaps Porzingis, you ever heard of him? He's a pretty good player. You watched him in the finals last year, pretty good basketball player, makes a pretty big impact on this team. And yet they're like, well, the Cavs, I mean, Mitchell didn't even play well, so.
I don't
like, what?
Well,
what?
I just don't get
Kristaps
that.
doesn't even play.
Yeah, I don't get that in a way too of like being like, oh, well, he played himself out of having the best player. Like, that's not necessarily, if you watch a football game and the quarterback throws 3 picks, you're not like, well, their best player played him out of that game. Like, no.
So that doesn't count. Yeah. So Shaq, low-key hater. That team could have won it all in 2011. But Danny kind of messed that up, if we're being honest. Not necessarily Shaq. Shaq was what he was.
The big 3 weren't there yet, were they? Or that was after?
They were there. Yeah. They could have beaten Miami that year if they had kept Perk, which is weird to say now, but
we are Rogue Media Sports.